Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Lauren. For those that I haven't met, I work at Enterprise Nation and I head up all of our female entrepreneurship activity here to support small businesses on their journey. So we've had a really great registration rate for today's session with Tim. It's all around your brand story. So the format of today's session is a short presentation, and then we will pop on and answer any questions that you might have. So if we don't get through all of the questions, don't despair. We can let you know how to connect with Tim after today's session. Tim, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and get cracking with the presentation. So thank you and enjoy, everyone.
Awesome, thank you. Hey everybody, nice to be here this lunchtime and get to speak to you. So as I said, I'm Timelia. I'm an advisor on Enterprise Nation. You can Google me on there and search me on there and find all the stuff. But I head up the UK part of a global team of design strategists called the Spill Team. I've got a podcast. Entrepreneur in residence at Nottingham University, which means they let me lecture on things like marketing strategy for entrepreneurial firms and brand strategy, which is kind of leads us into today's presentation. But before we kind of explore the details of how to tell your brand story, I always like to get us all on the same page, make sure we're all understanding and aligned of what brand actually is. Now, this definition on the screen, I've been in marketing, branding, creativity for 25 odd years, and this definition of brand is from a good friend, and I think that fellow advisor Matt Davies, he's just put it beautifully well. So brand is the meaning your customers attach to you and your offer. So brand is the meaning your customers attach to you and your offer. So with that definition of brand in mind, right, the true definition of brand, it's important for entrepreneurs such as yourself to understand how you can manage that meaning, right? And there's two parts, there's two kind of pillars of strategic activity of how entrepreneurs like us can manage that meaning, and that is communication and experience, right? Communication and experience. But today we're going to focus on the communication side, specifically storytelling. So story has long been the most effective form of communication. And when I say has long been, I'm talking 330 BC. There was a guy back in those days called Aristotle who first started to speak and communicate professionally and have mapped out what persuasive, what effective communication and storytelling means, and it's still right today because we humans are basically the same, right? We have the same parts of our brain and bodies and behaviors that make his work still effective today, and we're going to cover a bit of that later on. So if you're like me, right, if you've got a big idea that you want to get out into the world, the vehicle of narrative is the way forward, right? And there's been some amazing studies over the past couple of years, actually, by real brain scientists, so people much smarter than I, have discovered and have proven that narrative or story engages every aspect of our brain. So it engages us in our emotional brains, in our somatic, otherwise known as the physical. So I'm sure we've all had goosebumps when listening to a story, or laughed or cried or smiled, right? This is a physical reaction to storytelling. And obviously people dealing with B2B or in the business world also ticks the logical part of our brain. But there's one amazing thing I want to tell you about, one real proof that telling a story about your brand is the right way forward, right? To add value to your brand, the stories you tell can be proven effective, and that's through this little study, right? So these two guys you can see on your screen, they're called Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn, and back in, I think, 2009, 2010, they asked themselves a question, right? They asked, what happens when you hire creative writers to make up stories about cheap trinkets and bits of tat, right? And then post them online, right? So this study that you can Google afterwards is called the Significant Objects Experiment, right? And it demonstrated and it proved beyond doubt that narrative or story adds value to the products and services we are talking about, right? So for this experiment, these two guys, they had a bit of a session on eBay, right? They bought a total of 2,000 items for $129, right? 2,000 items for $129. You guys can do the math on that, right? These are not expensive, valuable items, right? Then they asked this little cohort of creative writers, so authors, copywriters, marketing people, salespeople, to write a story about each item. Then in the true form of a fair experiment, they relisted the items for sale on eBay using the same picture, the same title, that sort of thing. The only difference is they added this new piece of narrative, right, to see if the stories enhanced the value of the objects they were trying to sell. Now, at this point, I bet you're doing two things, hoping I get on to how you can tell a story, which I definitely will, and wondering how the experiment went. Well, the net profit from these 2,000 items, remember it was $129 they spent, was $3.6 million. $3.6 million. That's again, I'm not very good at maths, but around a 2,700% increase in the final markup of the item. Like the hypothesis that they bought from this, the learning that they took from this experiment, is that stories were the driver of emotional value and can transform any insignificant objects, products, or services into significant ones, right? There is, if you look into this study, and I can supply links later on, right? There's a really rubbish unicorn head, right? A really rubbish unicorn head that was bought for $1.40 something, and it was later sold for just under $2,000. Why? Because the stories handwritten about that item resonated with the buyer, right? So there's proof that stories create brand value, right? And that's what I want to do today. I want to talk you through this little model that you see on screen, right? And this little model is called the Story Star, or the brand Story Star. And I use it all the time in client workshops. So we're going to go round clockwise as you look at it, and I'll talk to each of the points and let you know what they mean, and then we'll hit up the questions. So not long left now. Every brand story, to be effective, needs to have something at the heart of it, right? One thing at the heart of it. You cannot tell an effective brand story about more than one thing, right? It dilutes the effectiveness. It dilutes the resonance to the thing, right? So you've got to have a heart of your story. Now, this heart of your story can be a big idea, right? It can be about your purpose or your why or a just cause you're fighting for. It can also be as simple as a story about a customer problem you meet or a customer need you can vanquish. But it has to be clear when you're creating a story that you have to be super clear about what that heart is. What is the thing, the idea you're trying to get to stick in the minds of the people who hear or read or listen to this story? Right. So that's part one. We're moving on to origins. Right. It's great to be able to communicate this big idea, right? The heart of your story effectively in a little nice concise sentence. But the thing that makes it meaningful, if you remember the definition a few slides ago, right? Brand is the meaning your customers attach to you and your offer, right? So to make it meaningful, have to be able to tell the origin story of this big idea, right? If there's any superhero fans out there, you'll be aware of the concept of origin stories. Like every superhero has an origin story, right? And all you entrepreneurs out there looking to build brands, right? You're the superhero in your story. So this is your opportunity in building narrative to talk about you, to talk about where this idea came from and why it matters to you and why you think it's important for the world, right? Why people should connect to it. So tell its origin story, look backwards, tell its what's the trigger moment, right? That made you come up with this idea that's now a brand or a business or a product or a service you've put out into the world. So moving on to that, right? We've got the heart, we've got the thing at the heart of the story. We now know its origin story. We know why it's important to us and why we chose it. Now you've got to resonate, right? You've got to make it resonate. So this switches perspective from being about you and your brand and your idea to being about people you choose to serve. Who are the audience? Who are the customers you're telling this story to, right? It's about them, not you. You've got to show that you understand your audience, right? Your customer base, your market. Shows you've got to really understand them and what drives them, like what problems they have, what needs do they have, what activities do they do, what are they interested in, what's their opinion about this sort of thing. Because you've got to formulate a narrative that shows you understand them and why this thing, this idea, the heart of your story is important, right? So it's got that product market fit, it's got that story audience match that's really going on. So we've got the heart of the story, right? We've got the origin story of why it's important to us, and now we've spoken to why they should care about it, right? We're trying to get them to resonate with the idea, because I think Simon Sinek said it best, right? It's not about doing business with people who want what you have, but people who believe what you believe, right? And Aristotle wrote, as I explained very briefly in the beginning, that people are driven by emotion, right? People are driven by emotion. You build trust through your origin story, right? And you get people to think, right? You get them to stop and consider and think about this thing that you're telling about in the resonate, which leads us on to inspire, right? Inspire. Now people should be asking themselves, okay, what's next? How can I get involved? What do I have to do to get this idea, to be able to adopt this idea, to buy this product, buy this service, follow this brand, right? You've got to paint a picture of what the world will be like with your idea adopted. You've got to paint a picture and future cast a little, like tell them the story, right? Tell them the narrative of what the world will be like. How will they feel? Like what will be better with your idea adopted? If you can use emotive language, right? Imagine standing in their shoes. How will they feel once they've bought this product or service and started using it, and it's improved their world, it's helped make things faster or better or nicer or more well, whatever the benefit is, right? You've got to get people excited. You've got to inspire them to take action, right? You've got to make them feel something, because we know scientifically been proven and been written about since 330 BC, that we human beings, we make decisions with the emotive bit of our brain, and then we justify them with logic, whatever is in our situation. But we're all human beings and we all make decisions emotively. So it's important that you have that. Which only leaves 2 points to my star and the last 5 minutes of the chat. So now you understand the idea, right? The heart of your story. You understand its origins, right? Why it's important to you. You've spoken to your audience to make it resonate with them and show why it's important to them and that you understand them and why this is a good fit. Not only that, you've told an emotive story. You've got them excited about this product, this service, your brand, right? And wanting them to take action. They're on the end, right? So that's the story as a whole. But to be an effective communicator in today's world, we've all got mobile phones. Some of you may be watching this very thing on a mobile phone, right? It's important that we simplify. We have the ability within us to simplify that message, right? To tell it in 5, 10, 6, 8 seconds, right? How do you communicate that story that we've just built in 10 words or less, right? Because Seth Godin says, if you can't explain your proposition in 8 words or less, you don't have a proposition, right? But it's really important to be able to simplify it. There's a super quick way that you can do this. I would start by giving yourself a 10-minute constraint, right? And writing a 50-word version of your story, then a 15, then a 5-word version. Do it back to back. Don't confer, don't stop. Do it in the 10 minutes. And you'll automatically, your brain will subconsciously leave out the stuff that's just filler words. It's a really useful tool I use all the time. I can explain that again in the Q&A afterwards if you're interested. But let me speak for the last 3 minutes about the final point on the star, and that's amplify, right? You've done some amazing work as a brand, right? You've had the bravery to start this thing, to put your idea into the world. You've told its origin story. You've shown how it matters to your audience, right? You've got them to inspire to action. You've got loads of little concise versions that you can tell effectively on any platform in any kind of time frame. Now you've got to amplify that story. What's the point of having a beautiful brand story like that if you don't amplify it? And there's an analogy, my final analogy before we wrap up, about this, and it's about musicians, right? Musicians are the best storytellers, the best marketers on the planet, because they get this idea, their new song, right? And they put it out into the world, but they don't just tweet it, right? They don't just stick it on Instagram stories and hope for the best, right? They work really hard. They amplify it everywhere, right? They go and speak about, they perform about it on stage, right? Like they do videos about it, they get PR about it, they get interviews about it, they go on radio, they do podcasts about it, they tell their fans, right? They all individually do it, right? But they work really hard, right? Until this idea has reached its max audience, right? Until it's fulfilled its job, until it's worked so hard that people are ready for a new story. Everybody's aware of this story, right? So that's my final point. Do this brilliant work, this brilliant strategic creative work of building a brand story. But that's kind of nothing if you can't simplify it, if you can't get it over in a concise way in a short time frame, because you know it's hard to earn attention at this stage. But make it work, right? Don't just let it sit on a shelf or on your Instagram grid, right? Amplify it out. Get the people who need to hear it, right? Tell the story. You're all storytellers. Every entrepreneur is a storyteller. And that, my friends, is about time. So we've looked today, just before we move on to Q&A, right? We've looked at the definition of what brand is, and that it's the meaning your customers attach to you and your offer. And the way you manage that meaning is through storytelling, because we know the significant object has proven it effective. We know it's been effective through history from the time of Aristotle, and we know it's been proven effective by actual brain scientists, have shown biologically our brains to stimulate when we hear a story, right? So now we know the reasons why you should tell a brand story, why you should have a brand story for your company. And the fact that you need to have one heart, one idea, one thing at the middle of your story, right? The beating heart of the story, because that any more than that will dilute your effectiveness. Then you know that you have to tell its origin story so people can build trust with you, right? Can find out why it's important to you. And then you get to resonate with them, right? Tell the story of why it's important to them, right? Why it should matter to them, how it solves their problem, how it meets their need, how it syncs with the interests and opinions that they have. And you've told the story of how to inspire action. What will the world be like with this idea adapted? You've done a bit of marketing work where you can simplify that down into a little 50, 15 and 5 word kind of proposition. And then you've set your marketing team or your typing fingers to work to amplify it, to get that message out into the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leaves us time for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. That was really great. And it was short time that we had, but yeah, really informative. Thank you. We've had a few questions, so let's dive straight in. So the question is around, you mentioned about engaging with your audience, asking their opinion, getting them involved. We've had a question about how do you ask for feedback, ask for thoughts without bombarding your customers? Is there a way to incentivize them? I guess there's no silver bullet here, but any tips?
Yeah, I mean, the language we use, right, is super interesting, and language and behavior goes together really well, right? So people like being asked a good question about themselves, right? The premise, the important word is a good question. You know what I mean? Like, so people will always be willing to answer a good question or to give their opinion or to give their thoughts if the question is good, if it's set in a scene that's relevant. Do you know what I mean? That it feels like it's a question for them, I would say. So to do that, I would, hopefully you've done some segmentation and targeting of your market by this point, so you've got a good grasp on the behaviors and personality types that make up your audience, right? I would use it like a marketing campaign, like be really specific. Go, right, these 30 people who are interested in this thing, what do I need to understand from them, right? And then ask those 30 people a question. The more generic you make the question and the more kind of broader market it goes to, the less relevant and resonant it will become, because it's a question for everybody, right? So a lot of people won't resonate with it. But I would, to sum that up, like, be very specific with the audience you ask the questions to, and that you will see a lot better engagement.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thank you, Tim. We've had a question. Somebody in the audience has shared their website, so we can check that out. I have created a brand around my daughter. Is this a good idea?
Good. It depends on the brand, if I'm honest. I will check it out and come back to you afterwards. But it's not a bad idea. Like we know, like I'm sure we all know, that personal brands are super important, right? Super powerful at the moment. We've all got personal brands, right? And if you've created, actually one of the biggest pieces of work we do with clients, right, is trying to get them to develop a brand personality and a language, right, and get them to understand it's a living, meaningful, kind of changeable thing like a human being is, right? So to have an inspiration for a brand as an individual, as a human being already, probably gives you a leg up, right, a head start in that sort of thing, because you can base it on that. Now, not knowing much more detail about it, like about the brand and what the parameters are, it might be have to delve into that, but it doesn't sound like a big idea as long as it's resonant and authentic and you know, will help you engage with your audience, right? As long as including your daughter in this brand or building your daughter's brand is part of that effective brand story that will resonate with the people who need to hear it. It's fine.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, that makes sense. Alexandra has asked, what brands do you admire in terms of storytelling?
I mean, the classics, right? Nike is a classic. If you haven't read Shoe Dog yet, the story of Nike, go out and get that book. It's pretty old, but it's amazing. Even if you don't like trainers, it's a very good book, just so you know. But Nike is a good one. But my favourites at the moment are a couple of independent. So Painter Jackets, which is Paynter jackets.
Yes, I've heard of them. They're great.
They are amazing, right? Becky and Hugh have started this sustainable jacket company, and they're incredible. But just subscribe to their emails, right? Because it's beautiful brand storytelling, and they have an amazing business. But they both, I think Hugh came from my other option, which is Hyatt Denim, which is HIUT, which is run by a guy called David Hyatt, who's ex-Agency Land, ex-Advert guy, and is a beautiful copywriter. But the stories, the narratives around what they do, like they both have one product, jeans and a jacket, right? They're not, you know, not super complicated to explain what jeans and jackets are, right? So it's the narrative, the whole stuff they build around that, right? The fans and the followers they get are worth checking out. But on the B2B side, there's some interesting software. I would look at maybe Salesforce, actually. And again, based on their book Trailblazer, is really good by their CEO. But Salesforce do a great job of storytelling, even though they're massive.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. This comment made me laugh actually, because I think it's could be quite relatable. So the lovely Joseph has said he likes the prints on the wall, and I thought to myself, how great would it be if I'd created these prints? I haven't, but if we were on a call right now and I could say, oh, thank you so much, this is my artwork, you can purchase this at. Do you know what I mean? I just thought that was an interesting point, because if you're networking online, surely, Tim, that's a great opportunity to showcase your products, right?
Oh my God, yeah, like visual language, right, is even more important than narrative. So we didn't have a chance to cover that today, right? But we're all visual creatures, right? If you can ask yourself how to explain your story or about your business in a picture, in a screen, like that's amazing. But there's nothing like a bit of visual proof and visual distinctiveness to do that.
Definitely. Amazing. Anna has asked, can you please repeat the jackets brand that you mentioned? So Hugh and Becky's brand.
Yeah, it's Painter, like painter and decorator, but spelt differently. So it's Paynter, Painter Jackets.
Perfect. And last question before we wrap up, Tim. So Avon has asked, what do you think of the story brand framework?
Oh, okay. So Donald Miller, I believe I might have got that surname wrong, but I listened to the podcast. I've read the book. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, it's like anything marketing and branding, right? There's 47,000 different frameworks of how to do it, right? And the story brand framework is a good one, you know, but it's not so much adopting like the story star, like we're not selling the story star that I did today. It's not about adopting the story brand framework. It's not about any of the other kind of narrative design, right? Nancy Duarte does some amazing stuff with 3-act structures and such like that. But it's about learning and understanding the big idea in our story is to be confident about telling your own brand story. I don't really mind what framework it's in, if I'm honest, as long as you do the brand story. right? The thing you take away is the brand story. So if you like the brand, the story brand framework, awesome. That's good because it allows you to tell an effective brand story. But if you don't, there are a bunch of others.
Brilliant. Helpful. Thank you so much, Tim. And so in the chat section on your control panel, you will see a link to Tim's profile on the Enterprise Nation platform, so you can connect with Tim and request a call with him, view services, etc. So it's a great way to engage with Tim after the session. We've also popped in the website as well there. Anything else to add, Tim?
No, that's about it. Like I say, the storytelling and brand are two very deep rabbit holes we can go down. So today was a snapshot of them both, but I am super open to chat about brand or story if you need it. So hit me up on Enterprise Nation, or I'm at Timelia UK on all the socials, which is on the screen. And I'm happy to chat to you about that there.
Thank you so much. We've had some great comments come through. Really interesting. I like hearing about the significant object experiment.
Objects.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Amazing. Well, let's wrap things up, Tim. Thank you so much for an amazing and brilliant presentation. Thank you all for tuning in. The session is recorded, so you can watch back. Pop onto enterprisenation.com this afternoon. It'll be on there. And do connect with Tim on the Enterprise Nation platform. Have a great day, Tim, and I will see you all shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.